Okay, good morning. Today I'm going to show you how to make cheese garlic biscuits. Okay, so I'm going to turn the camera around so you can see my worker area. So far, I have washed my hands. I have started the oven, preheated it so it will be hot, the right temperature when I'm ready to put the biscuits in. And I have read my recipe all the way through, which we will do together before you see the video. So the first thing I have to do is make my baking mix. My baking mix is going to be flour, which is here, baking soda, baking powder, remember the mixture, and salt. Simple. So we're going to start out with 3 cups of flour, 1 cup of measuring cup. I stir my flour so that it's kind of, fluffed up a little bit, no lumps. 1, 2, and make sure all the flour is out so I don't cheat myself, and 3. So cheese garlic biscuits is a lot of my students' favorite recipe. Got 3 cups of flour. Okay, we're gonna set the flour aside so I have room to maneuver. Now we're going to put in our baking powder. Now remember, baking powder is actually a recipe of baking soda and cornstarch and other things. So the recipe calls for 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. So 1, 2, 3 and a half. Yeah, 4.5 teaspoons of flour, and make sure you use baking powder, not baking soda. We talked about that before, and 1.5 teaspoons of salt. Salt is really important. As you saw in my little PowerPoint presentation, salt is what adds flavor. If you don't add salt to this recipe, or something that has, the salt, it will not have any flavor. Salt was a really great discovery in history on adding flavor to food. Also, it makes things, it enhances the sweeteners and sweet foods. And I'm there, 1.5 teaspoons of salt. Put that aside, clean up the salt that I spilled. Okay, now I'm gonna stir this up so that my salt and baking powder is mixed really well. And then I'm gonna take my fat. In this case, I'm using Crisco. Crisco is a hydrogenated oil. It's an oil that's liquid and it's been hydrogenated to make it into a unstable solid. So more or less it melts really fast. That's why fast food industries and stuff like to use it to fry their things in. It doesn't have any flavor. It's kind of, just blah. We used to think it was very healthy. Now with a lot of the research and stuff, it's not the healthiest thing in the world to eat. I only use it for 2 things: cheese garlic biscuits and pie crust. So you could use it for, you could also probably do this with butter, and these biscuits with butter, and they probably would be amazing. But I'm staying the way I always did it. You take your spatula and you're gonna pack this fat into the biscuits. You're gonna pack the fat into the biscuits. Just like that, see? It's all packed in, it's solid. And then you take your spatula and you're gonna kind of go around the edges of it, and you're gonna scoop it out. I hate using Crisco because it's so hard to clean because it's greasy. So you have to use a lot of soap or dish soap, and you have to use warm water. Put it over there. Now, we're now gonna take this thing. It's called a pastry blender, a pastry cutter, or a dough cutter, or dough blender. It has different names, but it has a handle, and it has these little, like little butter knives. If you don't have it, you could actually take 2 butter knives and do it. But basically, you are going to cut in the fat to the flour. So you're going to make chopping motions so that the fat is cut into really small pieces. It's really important not to handle this with your hands. it very much, because your body heat will melt the shortening. And if the shortening melts, your biscuits will not be flaky. I'm just chopping. Chop. Okay, so now, once there's no big hunks of flour, and you can see it pretty well in the picture up there, in the mirror up there. There's no big hunks of flour, and it looks like, it doesn't even look like it's a mixture. It's just, if you touch it, you can kind of feel the little tiny lumps of, little pieces of the fat. They should be the size of a green pea or a pigeon pea. So you want to keep chopping until they're very small. So what happens is when you bake the biscuits, they're going to melt, and it's going to cause the biscuits to be nice and flaky. Okay, so now, put this in the wash, you have your baking mix. So your recipe here says baking mix. So you have your baking mix. Now the next part of the recipe is you take 3 cups of baking mix, which is here. This is actually a little bit more than 3 cups because you put baking powder and stuff in it, but it's about 3 cups. And you are going to take 1 cup of milk. You have your liquid measuring cup. I'm using, almost get out of order. You also want to add your cheese. And you don't have to, but I like to add my cheese first.
Good morning, superstars. We're about to ring bell. Remember, today is a B-Day. It's a B-Day 246. Period 246 today. B-Day. Have a superstar day.
Okay, so I'm going to add a 1/2 cup of cheese. I'm going to have to stop in a minute, I guess, and let everybody in Zoom. 1/2 cup of cheese. And you can add a little more. I just keep it to a 1/2 cup in class because, budget being tight. But also, you want to not add too much cheese because then it comes like baked cheese and it's not so necessarily good, okay? So we have our baking mix with our cheese, and now we're going to add our 1 cup of milk. And I'm going to add it just a little bit, just like a 1/2 teaspoon, maybe more, because we didn't, this is a little bit more than 3 cups. Just pour your milk in there. Put this in the wash. We're going to stir it. Now, you want to stir it till it's mixed, but you don't want it to be really smooth. You want it to be a little lumpy, because the more you mix it, the more you stir it, the more you develop the gluten in the flour, okay? So this is called the biscuit method. That's why they're biscuits. And it's called the biscuit method because we are mixing it lightly, and because it is going to, we cut the flour into the shortening into the flour with a pastry cutter, and so the technique is called cut in. Okay, next step. Get your cookie sheet. Get a piece of parchment paper. If you don't have parchment paper, you can just bake them out on cookie sheet. I like parchment paper because it makes it easier for me to clean up. And I'm going to take 2 spoons. Now what you're going to do, this is going to make 12 biscuits. So you can kind of see it's kind of lumpy. And you want it to be lumpy. Just stir it to the bottom. Make sure there's no flour at the bottom that hasn't been incorporated. If it's horribly dry, you could add another tablespoon of milk. But I got this one just right on the money. So now you're going to take 2 spoons. You're not going to touch it with your hand, and you're just going to plop those biscuits right onto the cookie sheet. You're going to make 12. You might want to start a little smaller, and you can always add. They're going to bake kind of lumpy. Think of like an English muffin. So they're going to have like nooks and crannies and stuff to for the butter to melt. Okay, there's another one. And they take 10 minutes to bake. And when they come out, you're going to put melted butter. And now you can put, the recipe calls for garlic powder in the butter and parsley. The parsley is more just for flavor. The garlic powder obviously adds the garlic taste. If you want to do this for breakfast or something where you don't have that savory taste of garlic, you could do it without cheese and that. So I have to move these a little bit. I got them too big. 12, 3, 6, 9, 10, 11. See how lumpy they are? They're all machine, and that makes them so good when you put the butter on, okay? Now this one's gonna be a little too small, so I might have to take some off another one. You should always start out small and add to it. So this one's a little bigger, and it's also important that they're the same size because they're gonna bake at different rates. If they're too big, they're gonna be not as done. If they're too small, they'll get overdone. So these are now pretty much the same size. See how I'm just pulling it off and kind of just sticking it on another one. No biggie, right? Maybe this one over here. They're just kind of misshapen. All those little nooks and crannies and whatever will be where the butter melts. I'm gonna wash my hands again. I'm off camera, I know. And now they're gonna bake. The oven is not preheated yet, so I'm gonna go wait a few minutes. They're gonna bake for 10 minutes. When they come out, I will have melted butter to drizzle over top of them. So we will be back.